Hello, and welcome to SeniorCare's Living Wisely, Aging Well. We discuss topics of interest to people aged 60 and over, as well as adults living with disabilities. I'm Tracy Arabian, and today with me is Kaye Hapshe. Kaye is SeniorCare's Care Transition Coordinator. Welcome, Kaye. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to discuss long-term care services and how a person might learn about the services that could be available to them. So Kaye, what is the term long-term care services? What does that mean?
That's an excellent question, because a lot of people, as soon as they hear long-term, think we're talking about a nursing home. And that is not what it means at all. It just means that you need more than sporadic services. Like, for example, when someone falls or has minor surgery or something and they leave the hospital without going to rehab, they'll often be assigned a visiting nurse, and they'll come and visit them and help them reemerge into the community. That's short term. Long term is when you need things for more than that short period of time. So it could be an aide that comes to your home, someone to help with medication, it could be someone to do your shopping, all those types of things that are intended to be more than just once.
So I don't have a clue what services might be available to me. How would I find out what's out there, how to access it, or how much it might cost?
Those are all good questions, and yes, the answer is sometimes it depends. But in general, the reason SeniorCare is doing outreach education on a general basis is to provide answers to those questions. And so one of our programs is called Options Counseling. It's a free program which will meet with you either in your home, we'll talk with you on the phone, we'll email with you, because we have a lot of those caregivers that are like, come home, get the kids ready for dinner, do this, do mom's billing, do their own laundry, go to bed, and then they're like, oh, I have to email someone. So email is very helpful for those folks. But basically, Options Counseling is free, and it's available to anyone who is a caregiver, who might need care, who's planning their long-term service care, like, how do I stay home? How do I stay independent? How do I stay safe? And so therefore, these things through Options Counseling, the short and snappy answer is we help explain the landscape of services. And so at that aspect, when you first think you might need to plan for yourself, you could call and we could come out and sort of explain what is the VNA? What does it mean if I want more than I can afford at this point? How do I get access to services that would pay for things like that? How do I get paid to be a caregiver? The questions are endless. But in that, and when do I need an attorney? You know, those kind of things. So Options Counseling through an aging service access point, which is SeniorCare, is the way to do it. You would call our main number, which I believe they have listed. It's 978-281-1750, and you ask for information and referral. They answer questions. We have two people who are very skilled, and they answer questions like, are there any hairdressers that do home visits? They have lists of all sorts of things that you can't imagine that are on a list. And so I always tell people, ask. If we don't know, we'll put someone on it trying to find out. And so that people talk to information referral. If they have one question, bingo. If they want to understand more or how to get to this or that, that's when information refers them to me, which is Options Counseling. I have some colleagues that work with me, and then we'll talk with the person directly. We'll even talk with families as a group, because sometimes what the children can do, what the elder needs, what the neighbor can do, it has to all be sort of intertwined.
So an elder or their family could get Options Counseling. How is elder defined? How old is old?
That's an excellent question, because I find most people when they turn 60 are like, I'm not an elder. What do you mean I'm an elder? But in terms of services for the state, 60 is the break point. And it doesn't mean that you are elderly or infirm. It just means that you've hit 60. And so that's one thing, is what's an elder? Someone 60 and older. And then various things kick in when you're 62 and 65. But in terms of basic services, SeniorCare and other agencies like us throughout the state, because the state is carved into geographic zones. SeniorCare serves communities in Rockport and Gloucester, Essex, Ipswich, this will be good if I can name them all, Manchester, Beverly, Wenham, and Hamilton.
And Topsfield.
And Topsfield, thank you. And but in any case, and then you have also councils on aging in each of these towns. So that's also another good point, because you don't necessarily need to be 60, but they can acquaint you with different things. So the landscape is varied as to where and how you start with your information. Sometimes we refer people to the Council on Aging. Times people go to the Council on Aging and get referred to us. And so that's sort of like, what is an elder? That's 60. And then what do you do if you need help and you're not 60? Because there are a lot of people that might need help at some point in their life. Something's changed in their life. They're a caregiver for someone. They've had a diagnosis that changes the help that they now need. And so there's a variety of things we can talk with you about in terms of the Mass Rehab Commission is someone that works with people 60 and under. Then there's the Disability Support Center, who works with folks who are adults living with disabilities, but they need help sort of figuring out how to get to services. They'll help them figure out how to apply for SSI. And you might say, well, what is SSI? We could have all of these conversations, but a lot of times people have a path that they're following, and then something happens that diverges them from the path.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when we can be helpful, because the answer is varied for each person in each situation.
So I understand that elders can get services from SeniorCare, but they have to be eligible. What does that mean?
That's an excellent question too. So what is eligible? Eligible is, first, are you 60? 2, do you have a critical need? What is a critical item? Meal preparation, bathing assistance, dressing assistance, all sorts of like body type of care. Independent activities of daily living could be grocery shopping, could be bills payment, it could be someone to take you to Dunkin' Donuts for coffee, in the sense of like you can't get out, you can't drive, and so you have to have a critical need. You have to be 60. It's also, the cost for it varies depending upon your income. Some people pay very little because they make very little. And then there are other people who would pay more because it's a sliding scale. And so the question we always ask is, what is your income? Because SeniorCare and state subsidized home services do not get involved with what you own. We don't care if you own a home, we don't care if you have a bank account, because there's certain levels of services we can provide, and the cost is dictated by what you earn. And so therefore, some people, though, when they hear what that cost might be for 3 hours a week, shall we say, of service, they're like, well, I really can't afford that. So then that's when you want to talk to the person who's meeting with you to say, listen, these are my expenses, and this is what I can't afford, that $45 a month copay or $150, whatever it is based on your income. Because we can then seek a copay adjustment. So I always look at it this way: it never hurts to ask. Don't assume that you can't get it because we're telling you the price is X. It's always worth asking. We can go back to the office. We can seek information from a manager or someone to kind of like say, listen, we even have a form that we fill out, that, because we have forms for everything, as you can imagine. But where we list what your expenses are, because a lot of, there's all sorts of things and reasons. And so those are the basic criteria: age, income, critical need. And then sometimes people are at risk. They have so many things going on, so they might not exactly have 6 areas of need, which is typically what we're looking for, but it's worth discussing, because we might say, well, this person has just been diagnosed with this. They have no transportation. They're anticipating they're going to have this treatment cycle, and there's no informal supports. So what's informal? Neighbors, family, spouses, friends, that kind of thing. So on that aspect, our job is to kind of meet you where you're at, explain how things work, and help get you to the right connection.
Cool. So the long-term care services may cost money based on a sliding scale of your income and such, but the information and referral and the options counseling, those are free?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, to switch a little bit, I've heard the term SHINE. I've heard of SHINE counselors. What is a SHINE counselor?
That's another acronym that we really like. SHINE actually means Serving Health Insurance Needs for Everyone. So therefore, for example, before Safathia became the mayor of Gloucester, she was a SHINE counselor and worked through a liaison service at the hospital. She provided outreach to the communities through the councils on aging, and I believe she still does a little of that herself still. But basically a SHINE, and she has people now doing this work in those fields. In the councils on aging, you can make an appointment. You can do the walk-in clinic at the Addison Gilbert. You can call Beverly Hospital and any local hospital. But basically what they do in SHINE is they meet with you to talk about insurance needs. So therefore, when people hit 65, they become eligible for Medicare. But then there's a whole bunch of options as to which plan they should use to pay for gap insurance, to pay for pharmaceutical things. And that's when SHINE can help you sort of look at everything. And then, of course, if you're a computer savvy person, you can go right into Medicare.com and get a lot of information that way. But I find most people joining these networks, they want some support as to what to pick, what not to pick. How do I qualify for Masshealth? And they'll talk with them, because a lot of people will be like, well, what's Masshealth? And so we'll say, well, actually Masshealth, some people call it Medicaid. And then they're like, well, you're talking about Medicare? And we're like, no, actually. And that the thing is it's like Medicare, Medicaid, Masshealth, gap plans, all of those things. It's hard to navigate.
Oh, I went to a seminar about Medicare, came out more confused than when I went in.
Absolutely.
So I have a neighbor, and she's, I guess, my parents' age, and she seems to be doing pretty well. But what would I do? What would be appropriate for me to do if something seemed to have happened and her situation seemed to change? Would it be appropriate for me to try to reach out and help?
Absolutely. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is you can directly talk with your neighbor and say, would you like to talk to someone to learn about what resources are available should you need them? Because a lot of people don't want to be told they need help. And so then you can tell them, one, we can call SeniorCare, or he can call SeniorCare, and then we'll set up for an options counselor to meet with them and sort of talk about that landscape. And that's someone who you see needs possibly help. But what if you know they're in the house, they don't drive, they have no family, and how do they get their groceries? And they may not, and the house, like you can tell, the shrubbery is kind of disheveled, the snow doesn't get plowed regularly, the grass doesn't get cut often, so that you can tell they're living somewhat isolated life. So there are things that we don't have people to come necessarily cut your grass, I don't mean that. But at the same point, we can sort of talk about, well, what services are out there. And then sometimes we'll talk about, well, if you're paying for example, home delivered groceries, maybe there's other things we can do so you don't have to pay for home delivered groceries, and you can use that money for something else. And we're not here to develop a budget, but it is something so the person can call, you can call, and you can make an anonymous thing. And what we'll do is, I've had that happen too. My neighbor keeps calling and asks me to do her grocery shopping. I can't do that. I've fallen, or whatever the case, or just I can't be her only person. And I'm not able to tell her that. And so in that aspect, that's when I'll say, well, if you'll give me their name and number, I can call and say, if you give me permission, I can say you gave it. If you don't give me permission, I can say, I was asked to call you. Someone noticed that you might be in need of some services, assistance, or information. So I don't reveal, but a lot of times it is better, truthfully, if you say, can we meet together with them? Because I like to use the power of no, because who doesn't want to help your neighbors? You do. But at the same point, or your sister, or your friend, or your child, or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, sometimes you can't. And the people who keep helping when they can't endanger their lives, their ability to get out. And the power of no is saying, no, but I can help you find out. Or I can do it for a month, and then we need to get something to set up. But yeah, and yes, call me for emergencies. But it is, this world is so spread out. Children live out of state. People don't have children. Their siblings are scattered all over the place. So the network isn't, I call it the Auntie Network. My grandmother was one of 6. She had 4 sisters and a brother. The 5 sisters operated like a firm network. One needed help, they called.
They were all there.
And they did it, and they lived in the same general communities, so it wasn't a big deal to, and their children go from place to place depending on who was doing what and all of that. Well, that network, by the time my mother was an adult, was different. People had moved to the suburbs. You had neighbors, and then my generation, more and more women work. There's less people home. So therefore, that network is gone. It's not like at 2 in the afternoon, the neighborhood could be empty pretty much. And so on that aspect, how to deal with that sort of loss, who doesn't want to stay home? Everybody wants to stay home if they can. Everybody wants to be as independent as possible. Everybody wants to get some help maybe, but not like you got to do this kind of help. It's not about that. It's about what do you need, what do you want, and how can we help you get there?
Now, you mentioned people whose parents might live in a different state.
Right.
My parents live in Arizona, and there are times I'm concerned, is options counseling available to me as a long-distance caregiver?
Absolutely. One of the things that we focus on is, does the caregiver or person seeking the information live in Massachusetts, in this area? If the answer is yes, then I can help connect them. Like, for example, I had someone who, he lived in Beverly, but his parents lived in New York. And he wasn't sure what the network was. So I explained sort of what our network was like, because he was really debating, should he encourage them to move here? Or should he encourage them to get help in their neighborhood? And so when we started talking, I learned that his dad was a veteran. I learned that they were not wealthy people. They lived in public housing. And so I was able to help connect him with New York's version of SeniorCare. Okay. Every state is a little different. Not every state has it. But on that aspect, and then that conversation has happened other ways. I have people who, their parents live here, but they want them to move to New York. So how do we do that? Or, or my mother's been like the one that I thought was hard sometimes. Her mother had moved to Florida 25 years ago because she hates snow. But her mother couldn't really independently live on her own, and they couldn't afford to provide all the services that she would need. So she's like, I don't want to tell my mother, but she's going to have to move back here because I can't afford to move to Florida.
Yeah.
And so that conversation, although it's not easy, we can at least explain how things work, what housing's available, how to apply for housing. We have a housing advocate. Because at the end of the day, SeniorCare is like a consortium. We have networks and connections with lots of people. So it's not about an options counsel coming and saying, all right, this is what we're going to do. It's sort of, these are the options you have, because not every service that SeniorCare offers is the right one for you. It might be more appropriate for you and as an individual to deal with another agency such as PACE, which is also known as Element Care, or to work with a variety of different methods and ways. So we're not just coming to your home to tell you the network through SeniorCare's view, well, this is what we can do, this is blah, blah, blah. It's more about, well, this is how it works, these are some of your options, and then these are what you need to do. And for some people, the answer is they have estate planning needs. They've never set a healthcare proxy. They've never done a power of attorney. They've never finished a will, but they're sitting in a home that they own. They have no mortgage, and they don't really know what they want to do. They haven't talked about it with their kids, and they're 82. Not everybody, you're doing well, it's fine, but those are good things to talk about when the issue isn't there. because it gets a little chaotic when something happens. And for example, yesterday I was talking to someone whose mother was coming home with hospice services. Never had services before, doesn't even know what it means. Hospice scared the heck out of her.
Yeah.
And so I was able to assure her of a couple of things. One, hospice doesn't mean you're going to die tomorrow, which a lot of people think, because that's how it used to be. You didn't have hospice until right till the end. Hospice just means that you can get some help in your home, and you have a condition that means you might die within 6 months. It doesn't mean you will.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean people don't sometimes leave hospice. They get better or different. I don't mean that they get cured. I don't mean that, but they stabilize to such a point. So we talk about a lot of those kind of things. I think I just went wildly off track. But
That's okay. Now, so SeniorCare also works with adults who are living with disabilities.
yes.
If I have a friend who has an adult child that needs assistance and such, should they call SeniorCare?
Absolutely, because we do talk to a fair number of folks that are under 60 that either have never had services. For example, it could be someone with who's got a intellectual disability, and they've always lived with their parents, and now the parents are aging. What and how? So, and they're not necessarily asking those questions. And they're not necessarily signed up for any kind of services already because the family took care of things.
Yeah.
They made sure this person had a place to live, things to do and eat and all of that. But now maybe people have really gotten infirm, and what now? So that's one case. Then it could be someone who, for example, my father had a stroke at 52, which it was severe enough that he had to leave work on disability. Oh. And so on that aspect, he wasn't going to die. He couldn't return to work. Had a pension, but it wouldn't really kick in till a certain age. But then how do you qualify for disability? How do you get insurance? What does, and every story is different, but a lot of people are like, well, how do I keep paying the mortgage? I have children in college that I'm trying to, all of those questions. And so does it mean I'm going to solve every problem? No, but I'll tell people about things like the Disability Center. I'm messing up the name, I'm sorry. But
The Disability Resource Center.
Thank you. And I'll tell them about SHINE. I'll tell them about what Masshealth could be, aka Medicaid for an adult under 60. And so on that aspect, and then what's Mass Rehab? What can they do? How do you apply for it? All those kind of things. And sometimes the question is they can't remain in the setting in which they were living. So what do you do then? And those are, again, all sorts of questions. And sometimes the answer is, well, you actually should seek an attorney that's specialized in disability so that they can help you do estate planning, help you apply for disability, help you get prepared to accept state services. And it's a complicated story, but any information sometimes is helpful just to get you in the right direction.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that you haven't been able to say yet that you feel like you need to?
The only thing I would like to add is that April is always Healthcare Decisions Month, and you may not be watching this show in April. So know that you can call SeniorCare to talk about a healthcare proxy through honoring choices. We also talk about power of attorneys, and we have life directives and things of that nature, and that's something options counselors do as well. So even though it may not be April when you're watching this show, and if you don't have a healthcare proxy or you want to update it, that would be a reason to call.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kaye. This has been very interesting. To learn more about SeniorCare and options counseling and information and referral, you can go to our website at www.seniorcareinc.org, or you can give us a call at 978-281-1750 and ask to speak with information and referral. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.